Hey, so how's it, guys? Welcome to a revamped, reborn edition of Freedom FANatics. I am your host with my awesome colleague Solon and Tiejo. And today we've got some very interesting topics lined up for you. Some lit conversations lined up. And so today, what we're going to do is we're first going to chat about some fan content, and then we're going to talk about an important news story that we found particularly interesting and noteworthy. So first up, we're going to talk about the context around which this fan article, why we want to speak about it. So on the weekend, the Blitzbokke won their fifth consecutive HSBC World Rugby 7 series. And this is after they broke their own record of a fourth consecutive series victory last year. And on the same time, this past weekend, we also had the Proteas cricket team win a ODI series against India on the back of a Test series win against them before. And we know that Cricket South Africa has been through the absolute most recently with their board. They've had social justice hearings ongoing. The whole Black Lives Matter scandal last year. We had players refusing to take the knee, and there was a lot of backlash against that. So on the back of this, I think it's worth delving into Ben Kuhn's article, who used to be with Fan last year. And getting a phone call from my grandmother. Not now, Granny. So now this article from Ben, he essentially highlights the advantages that sporting opportunities have for kids in schools. And now kids are now back at school, I'm sure to the excitement of many parents around the country. He highlights some important things, the benefits of sports to kids. Tiejo, I'm going to start with you. Then we'll go into the article a little bit. Growing up, was sport a thing for you? I mean, what sort of value did you see for sport growing up?
Not at all, actually. I was one of those naughty kids who would always run away when it was time for sports. But of course, sport is important for keeping healthy first and foremost. Secondly, for creating relationships with other people. I mean, it makes life much more easier to make friends on the field than having to make them outside the field, And yeah, those are the only points I'll raise for now, sure. But I do think sports is important, sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Sholin, what are your thoughts on Ben's article?
Yeah, man. I think, as Diego mentioned, sports is absolutely important, especially in like the community where I grew up. We are major soccer fans, so it's the football world on this side. And I think that sports generally has the ability to unite people, unlike anything else. In the article, Nelson Mandela quotes there's a quote is mentioned about Nelson Mandela that say something to that effect. And I think it's absolutely true because like our rugby team, even just this past weekend, or even when they won the Rugby World Cup, it wasn't a matter of the skin color of any player, but it was the ability for them to cooperate and actually work together. And if we really want to compare them to the cricket team, as you mentioned, that's been completely race obsessed over the last period. I think that when we see a non-racial team get together and actually work together, we can see the effects. And we don't need to look any further than to see what non-racialism does, where people are chosen on merit and not only because you have to fill a quota or a sports quota for whatever reason to rectify whatever injustice took place in the past. But if you focus on merit and the abilities that each individual can bring to the team.
Yeah, I mean, meritocracy is kind of an absolute when it comes to sport. I mean, no one wants to be in a team when they're not good enough. I mean, obviously there's space to put a player in, let them grow. But I think that what we're kind of getting to here is the ability for people to have the opportunity to play sports, and I think that's also incredibly important. And we had Simpe Jonas and Gerbrand van Heerden on last week, I think, chatting about the education budget, the basic education budget, the hundreds of billions of rands that goes into it. And then when we look at the facilities available to the majority of children in this country, it's very limited. And so even just that stepping stone into the sporting arena is severely limited. So, I mean, Tiago, I mean, can sport be a means to demand more accountability from government in how budgets are spent? Maybe is sport something that we should maybe be looking at in terms of schooling budgets in particular? Maybe are we not paying enough attention to that, just from an extramural point of view for kids?
Absolutely. I mean, it's written in the article that when you compare township schools, rural area schools, and suburban schools, there's a huge difference, and the main difference lies in the very question of sporting facilities at the schools. So I think, of course, government should be held accountable for not doing more in terms of building sporting facilities at township schools, rural area schools, and really doing the job of truly converting the schools into true beacons of hope that could in future produce national sport players and international sport players, really, who would fly the South African flag high.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sheldon, I think we speak about racial quotas. We've had quote cards featuring the likes of Ashel Prince, Makai Ntini, speaking about the sort of like saying, we need to work on development. We can't focus on race. Do you think if we got this right at a grassroots level, we would be talking about the sort of things we're seeing at Cricket South Africa with, I mean, obviously it's going into some historical stuff there, which obviously is a little not particularly kosher, but could this be a solution that, solves the problems that we see at the professional level?
Yeah, for sure. I also think that when sport is prioritized at the grassroots level, especially on school, especially with those who aren't necessarily academically inclined, like some kids definitely struggle with academics, you find that some of them actually perform much better in school than they would otherwise. And that's why I think sports is definitely has a holistic approach to education, where it's not just sitting in a classroom, getting a textbook and repeating whatever is in the textbook, but it does definitely have a holistic approach. And I think if we can demand that culture in our schools, and not just blaming it on the government necessarily, but actually demanding that, we need more school activities at our local school. If we can demand that here, it will definitely affect the results we see at the national level. And we will obviously be able to put the best team forward when all of our schools are actually participating in sports, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it doesn't necessarily have to be sports.
Yes.
I mean, I remember visiting a school in Hanover Park, and they were so keen on their marching band. That was a massive part of these kids' livelihoods. So I think, I mean, and it comes, and we need facilities, we need the money to go where it needs to go, but we also need kids to feel safe. And I think also importantly, maybe something we haven't even spoken about is the role models that can come about from having coaches, from having teachers who are involved with their not only educating their kids in the classroom, but also on the sports field. Yeah. So, guys, from moving along to our news item of the week, it's a little bit less inspiring than the Blitzbokker, but this piece I just thought was wild. So this piece, which is in the City Press by Jana Smit, titled 26,025 police guns stolen or missing. So I'm just going to run through, just going to read briefly what this article says. So the article was triggered by a series, a number of firearms going missing at a police station in Joburg. 158 firearms disappeared from the evidence room at the Nord police station in Johannesburg. And Nord, guys, is not a in a dodgy area. This is in the heart of Johannesburg. And then, according to the DA spokesperson, Okita Blanche, in the past 5 financial years, 3,405 police firearms were stolen or went missing. So, I mean, basically, the people we are entrusting to keep us safe are losing or stealing the firearms that they are confiscating from criminals. So it's a bit of a warped situation going on here. But what I found hilarious late, or in a very sort of in the best sense of the word, was that the article goes on. Gideon Joubert, editor of Paratus, who we've featured on a quote code before, says that in terms of the Firearms Control Act, the police were obliged to keep an electronic register of firearms. Now, this is great. The electronic system that monitored where forensic evidence and firearms were in the police system was turned off several months ago because the service provider had not been paid. Shonen, off the bat, what are your thoughts?
Sure, my man. This type of incompetence is not a mistake. I have to be honest. This, I feel like they know exactly what they're doing, especially with regards to firearms going missing, as you say, because especially on the Cape Flats, one of the probably the most prominent gang leaders, his name was Rashad Stahi. They were part of the Hard Livings. Even him, during one of his interviews on documentaries on BBC, if I remember correctly, he clearly stated that, you know what, that the South African police service were actually providing gangs, including his gang, with firearms and claiming that it was either stolen or it went missing, however, but they were actually, in some cases, providing it to the gang members for free. So I don't think that this type of incompetence is, by mistake or it's coincidental, because it's very much a part of the lack of accountability that we find in the police service. And I'd just like to note one more thing, that as you mentioned, Gideon Joubert mentioning the rules that these police officers are meant to follow, because it's law that they need to keep a register of some sort of the weapons in their possession. The police, especially Becky Chele, are the most prominent guys trying to limit gun ownership for, law-abiding South Africans, yet the police themselves cannot even follow the rules that they have set out. They cannot even keep account of their weapons, and yet they want to take it away from ordinary South Africans.
No, that's good. Yeah, exactly. The Firearms Amendment Bill, which they posed last year, seeking to take away firearms from citizens who want to defend themselves. I mean, you actually cannot make this stuff up. I mean, therefore, is the police force actually just another failing state-owned entity?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything surprising really around this. This is simply an extension of what's happening in the country. Corruption has become part of our daily lives in South Africa, and some of the police are deeply involved in the corruption cases in South Africa, from cases around selling of drugs to selling of police guns and everything. Yeah, so it's all part and parcel of really the decay of South Africa as we know it. South Africa falling apart. It's all part and parcel of that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, Sholen, maybe the bigger issue at hand here is what we've been discussing internally, at least, is that corruption is not in and of itself the problem, but rather a symptom of a broader governmental failure and a lack of accountability. So, I mean, how do we find our way out of this? What, as an ordinary citizen at home, already the private security sort of numbers, individuals, they are, the private police service as an industry is 3 times larger than public policing. Yet our crime rates are still so high. So, I mean, where do we go to from here? For like, where do you think citizens can play a role in trying to demand better, less corrupt policing?
Yeah. Alex, for me, most important is that I think like ordinary citizens and community members should definitely be getting involved in activist like action society. If I remember correctly, like they are definitely prominent safe like promoting safety and security in our communities and getting behind these type of guys that definitely, they stick it to our leaders through their petitions and their judicial procedures to keeping our leaders accountable. And another active way I think that community members can definitely take security into their own hands, because clearly our police service is failing. And taking it into our own hands, our own safety and security, simple actions like neighborhood watches. Like I know in my community, we have a very strong neighborhood watch organization that that's taken over the responsibility of a failing police service that is under-resourced, that's never actually showing up in our communities, and that actually filled the void instead of just complaining that there's not enough policemen, there's not enough prosecutions taking place for criminals, and they're actually saying like, you know what, we will take the safety of our fellow community members, our children, into our own hands, because whether we like it or not, safety and security, law and order is the foundation for any successful or society, to be honest, because without it, everything else falls apart, because otherwise anarchy will reign. So I definitely think that it's time that, these type of community organizations are more are rooted up or more promoted, and people are actually taking action themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one other aspect is just, understanding that safety and security is a point of individual liberty. And so, that's what we try and do at FAN, just be engaged. Tioko is heading up the articles that we're putting together. Arm yourself with good arguments as to why safety and security is important. I mean, obviously, in the plain sense of the word, it's self-explanatory, but I think from a point of understanding it as something that is important to your future, as Sholan has said, without it, anarchy reigns. So, guys, I think on that note, I think it's time for the burning questions with Mbali, which is up next. Mbali, welcome back to Freedom FANatics.
Welcome back
Over
to
to
Freedom FANatics. Wow, so thank you so much, Alex. Hi, guys. As Alex has said, welcome to the segment of Burning Questions. And guys, today, amazingly, the code card that we're actually talking about speaks a lot to the corruption and the incompetence that you guys were just speaking about. And this code card is from Mwele Mbeki, and it reads, the country has an increasingly corrupt, incompetent, and indifferent government that has run the state-owned enterprises it inherited from the apartheid regime into the ground. What do you guys think about this code card? And as I've said, it speaks very well to what you guys were discussing just now.
Let me.
Alex,
I
you
think.
can go first.
Yeah, I think.
It's very depressing, I know. Hence, the breathe in and out.
Man, it's too early in the year for this. No, I think it speaks very much to. I mean, in the first half of the show, we touched on policing, we touched on sporting codes, we touched on schools, it's just that general sort of culture of corruption. But I think, as we were saying earlier, I think the important thing to realize is that corruption is a symptom, not the cause. The cause is a government that is led by a socialist document drawn up in the 1960s, the National Democratic Revolution, and the various policies that go with it that allow for corruption to happen, and the destruction of institutions that actually can help keep politicians honest.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely do agree with that. Mr. Sholin, do you have anything to add before we go into the comment of the week?
I definitely agree with Mr. Mbeki. The more logical one and practical one, I think. And we definitely do have a corrupt and incompetent government. However, I also want to note that we have seen that does not necessarily need to be the case, because in places like Midvaal, in Gauteng, with the city of Cape Town, across South Africa, there are some municipalities where a practical, pragmatic way of doing things, of just giving basic services to people, whether it's water, electricity, and service delivery. These are basic things where in some governments in South Africa it's actually taking place. However, at national government, I think this quote is 100% on point and accurate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. Okay, guys, let's move on to the comment of the week, which is a very passionate one, I must say. I love
Mbali, while you bring that up, can I just make one last point?
Yeah, you can.
Before this comment, it's just that I think it's important that we have people like Moletti Mbeki who aren't afraid to say it how it is. Call a spade a spade,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, I agree. Okay, guys, so this comment comes from a person called Graham, and it reads, "This is common knowledge, and people will still support these criminals by voting them into power. This by law makes them an accessory to the ANC crimes against humanity. Only grave train riders will vote for them to keep their pockets lined." This guy is very passionate. Crime against humanity. Mr. Diego, I'll start with you. Do you think Graham's point is valid?
Yeah, let me seek clarity quickly first. Is this a comment to the card you put up the first time? Oh yeah, no. I think Graham is completely correct. I mean, since the dawn of democracy, we've seen public institutions and state-owned institutions like your PRASA, your ESCOM, and SAA being brought down to their knees by the ANC government, mainly due to the whole deployment policy thing of theirs. Deployment has caused many problems for us in state-owned entities, whereby people who are not competent enough for positions are hired into those positions still because they are loyal members of the ANC. But I think Graham is very, very much correct. People keep on voting these people into power, and they continue to be corrupt. In fact, the more you vote them into power, the more corrupt they become.
Yeah.
So he's very much correct. Sure.
Definitely.
But if I can just give a challenge. I just want to be the devil's advocate for a minute here.
Let's go.
I am no fanboy of the ANC at all. But when he says that, that voters who are voting for the ANC are somehow accessories to the ANC's crimes against humanity,
are they not?
this would be my challenge. I would be like, that would be simplifying the fact of the meaning that the ANC have for many of the older generation, because many of the older generation tend to see the ANC as this
The
liberators
savior.
from apartheid to democracy. Yeah. And therefore, I think I would actually challenge Graham and actually tell him, you know what, instead of necessarily being that these voters are accessories, because the majority of them still vote for the ANC, let's not forget. We shouldn't just be judging them and saying that, you know, you guys are accessories and criminals or whatever the case may be, but actually challenge them and ask them, why are you still voting for the ANC when there are clear alternatives towards the ANC? Because, you know, accusing people of being criminals is very a disengagement when we need to be keeping more people engaged. So instead of them voting for the ANC, you should be helping them to vote for an alternative opposition to the ANC. So I think that is a better solution than just accusing people of being criminals and accessories to crime.
Definitely, but I must say, I will judge them in 2022 if you still voting for the ANC. I'm definitely judging you. You can, obviously, you can be like, why are you voting for the ANC? They're going to be like, yeah, it's my savior. Sir, it's 2022. Can we, you know?
Okay.
But yeah, I think, guys, if there's anyone who wants to say last words, you know, Alex, I'll give it to you. Oh, Mr. Tiejo.
Oh, well, no, I just wanted to respond to Shole. And of course, people who vote for the ANC do have their own personal reasons for voting for the ANC, but that does not stop them from becoming accessories or enablers of
Yes, sir.
criminal activities of the ANC. I mean, you can have your personal reasons for voting a certain party in, and still be an enabler of corruption by through voting in a corrupt bunch of people to lead the government. Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I do think yes, they are accessories. They are enablers. Sorry.
Okay, let's all judge everyone who voted for the ANC. Okay, great.
No, Mbali, I think it's just my 2 cents. Yeah, I don't think I don't know about the crimes against humanity bit, and I don't know about this by law being, you know, if you vote for a corrupt party that engages in criminal activities, it makes you an accessory to their shenanigans. But I think one thing we must bear in mind is that there's a large portion of the electorate that tie social grants to the ANC, and so when it comes to election time, the idea that you would lose that if, let's say, an opposition party comes into power, they're going to take away your social grant. That's a very powerful thing. But as Sharon says, there's historical roots. But I think the important thing, what I like about this comment, even though there's parts of it I disagree with, is that it brings it back to, if you want change, you have to go to the polls. You need to vote with your feet.
Absolutely.
Vote with your feet. Yes, definitely vote with your feet, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Freedom FANatics. Catch us every Tuesday on Instagram, Facebook, and on Twitter and YouTube. Guys, remember, your freedom is worth fighting for.